My parents decided to attend my sister's housewarming party instead of my wedding because I wouldn't invite her after she punched me. So instead of the usual, my grandparents are the ones walking me down the aisle now. I've always felt like my parents had a special place in their hearts for my older sister, Rachel, and that I was just kind of in the background. She was the one they intended for, while I came along as a surprise just 10 months later. It seems like they might not have really wanted me, but chose to go through with the pregnancy regardless. My mom's parents were gone before I even came into the world, but my dad's parents were around and played a huge part in raising me. My grandparents were always there for me, offering the love and support that I sometimes miss from my own parents. I can think of countless times when my parents would take my sister on trips, leaving me behind with my grandparents. When I was a kid, it was all good times living with my grandparents, but as I hit around 6 or 7, it started to dawn on me just how unfair things really were. Honestly, my issues went beyond just my parents. My sister Rachel was there too. I didn't have any bad feelings towards Rachel, but I couldn't shake the sense that I was just an unwelcome extra in the family dynamic. She totally got it and made me feel like I was just some random person in my own place every single day. She constantly had to one-up me on everything, whether it was grades, getting our parents' attention, or even the tiniest achievements. It was like I was stuck in this never-ending struggle for approval, and no matter what I did, I always came up short since my parents seemed to favor her every time. Because of that, I often felt pretty inadequate, and we just never seemed to be on the same wavelength. It felt like we were always in this ongoing competition, and she always managed to win. There was this one time when she really wanted to befriend a group of girls, but her nerdy side held her back from making the first move. So one of the girls and I had art classes today, and she totally introduced me to the rest of the group. We all ended up hanging out together, which was pretty cool. Rachel was totally envious of this, so she got my parents to have a chat with me about making sure she was included whenever I was chilling with them. I attempted to stand my ground, but my mom labeled me as selfish, and my dad chimed in, reminding me that she was my sister and I had a responsibility to take care of her. I reluctantly went along with it and introduced Rachel to the other girls. Rachel doesn't have many friends, which makes her seem overly eager. She often tries hard to impress the girls in our group, but it usually ends up feeling a bit pushy. Even with all her attempts, she just couldn't seem to fit in with the group, and the uncomfortable vibe between Rachel and the other girls was impossible to ignore. So there was this girl who had a crush on a guy, and Rachel decided it was her mission to go up to the guy and spill the beans about the girl's feelings. He chuckled since he wasn't into it and went on to share the story with everyone, leaving the girl feeling embarrassed. The girls made it clear that they didn't want Rachel to join us for our hangout, so I went along with it. But Rachel was not about to let that slide. She totally lost it when she realized the girls were ignoring her and ran to our parents, demanding that I shouldn't hang out with those mean girls either. After all, I was her sister, and I was supposed to have her back. I stood my ground and pointed out that it was her own doing that led to them not wanting to be friends with her, but as always, my parents sided with her. They went on about how Rachel meant no harm and suggested I should persuade the girls to let it go. But if they refused, I was told to just cut ties with them too. I stood my ground and said no. I enjoyed spending time with them, and unlike Rachel, I wasn't about to risk my friendship at all. I let my parents know that I was done with it and that it wasn't my responsibility to find friends for Rachel. My parents were really upset and ignored me for weeks, but honestly, I'm glad I held my ground. This crew of girls has stuck by me all this time and are pretty much like my sisters now. I've shed tears alongside them, shared laughs, and experienced some of the most significant moments of my life together. Back then, it was super tough for me to stick to my choice. There were times when uncertainty sneaked in, and I found myself wondering if I had truly made the best decision by putting my own happiness first instead of catering to their desires. There were more factors that contributed to Rachel's growing disdain for me. There was this other situation involving a boy. She was totally into this guy, and I was completely in the dark about him. We would chill together in class since we were buddies. I appreciate the gesture, but I had to turn him down for junior prom because I was already going with someone I liked. Eventually, when Rachel discovered what happened, she raised a huge fuss, telling my parents that I always take things she desires and that I had been intentionally flirting with the guy for months. She threw a ton of hurtful words my way, that no one should ever direct at their own sister, and even went to my parents to say she wished I wasn't her sister. My mom took her side, saying it was unfair of me and that as a sister, I should follow the girl code. I tried explaining that I wasn't into the guy at all and had already turned down his invitation, so she could totally go for it if she wanted, but Rachel just wouldn't drop it. Reflecting on it, I feel like she was aware that the guy would have turned her down regardless, so she just needed to vent her frustration on me because he chose to ask me instead of her. There was this one time my dad decided to take me out for ice cream, saying he wanted to have some quality father-daughter time together. Honestly, this never went down, so I was pretty stoked about it. So he began firing off a ton of questions, like whether my boyfriend and I were being cautious, if my boyfriend had a solid family background, or if we had ever experimented with drugs. I was totally caught off guard by his questions and asked him to clarify what he was getting at. So my dad finally dropped the bombshell that Rachel had been spinning these wild tales for months, claiming I was out there doing drugs and drinking with my boyfriend. This was totally false, and I had to show my dad my phone to prove that Rachel was not telling the truth. Later, when my dad called her out on all the lies, she tried to claim that no one our age just hangs out with a guy and that I was keeping secrets from everyone. I was really frustrated and ended up yelling at her for stirring up unnecessary drama. I told her it wasn't my fault she had no one to date and that she should stay out of my business. Rachel wasn't a fan and ended up punching me. This totally came out of the blue, since he had never shown any signs of being physically aggressive before. I hit the ground hard, and suddenly my nose was bleeding as I clutched my face, overwhelmed by the pain. My parents hurried me to the ER, and during the whole ride, they were begging me not to report Rachel to the police. They wouldn't stop going on about how it would totally mess up her life, and there I was in the back seat, just holding my face in disbelief. Rachel was totally indifferent and didn't bother to say sorry. So when the nurse asked me about what happened, I just laid it all out there, and then she ended up calling CPS. My parents were really angry with me for getting CPS involved, seeing it as a total betrayal of family loyalty. To them, Rachel's actions were just a simple mistake, a one-off event that didn't really deserve such extreme measures. They begged the officials, claiming that Rachel posed no threat to me and that her behavior was completely uncharacteristic. Ultimately, Rachel was dismissed, but they cautioned my parents that they would monitor our situation closely in case anything else occurs with me. As you might expect, Rachel was totally rattled, and my parents were feeling it too. Eventually, my parents expressed their disappointment in me for what they perceived as an attempt to sabotage my sister's life. My mom broke down in tears, saying I was ripping the family apart by bringing in outsiders. My dad's disappointment was so obvious, and his words felt loaded with judgment as he asked me why I chose to make things worse. I made it clear that I wanted Rachel out of my life, and they were totally on board with that. I felt a bit guilty about bringing in the authorities, but honestly, for the first time, I felt a sense of safety in my own home after Rachel got that formal warning. After my parents had a private chat with her, she completely cut off communication with me. I definitely liked this way more than her always being around me or trying to get involved in my life. After my grandparents heard about what happened, they told me to get my things together so I could stay with them for the rest of high school. They told my parents, and since they didn't really push back, I ended up moving in with my grandparents. Here, I actually felt a sense of safety and love that was missing at my parents' place. The last days of high school were pretty awesome, and I created some unforgettable moments with my friends. My parents didn't bother to visit or even call me during all that time. I understood they were content with their cherished daughter, so I never reached out, even though it pained me that they could so effortlessly cast me aside as if I were insignificant. During my high school graduation, my parents were only there to support Rachel. It was like I was invisible to them, and no congratulations, no acknowledgement, just a complete lack of recognition. I felt like a total outsider. But my grandparents were present and called out my parents for being so obvious with their favoritism. I'm not sure what my grandfather said, but later on, my dad came up to me in a pretty awkward way and congratulated me. Eventually, I discovered that I got into a solid college with a full scholarship. I was really relieved because I was stressing over the thought of asking my parents for any financial support. I told my grandparents about this, and they suggested treating me to a nice dinner at a restaurant. After dinner, my grandmother shared some pictures of me on her Facebook, along with a lengthy caption expressing how proud she is of my achievements as a student. So our relatives caught wind of it and started congratulating me. I think a few of them might have even contacted my parents, who were totally in the dark about the whole situation. Rather than being supportive, my mom reached out the next day to inform me that Rachel had shut herself in her room, upset over not getting into any colleges yet. She accused me of intentionally making my sister feel worse about her grades by discussing them with our relatives. She said it was all on me since Rachel was supposedly feeling down after the CPS thing, and I had driven her to get bad grades. I was completely devastated that my own mother could point fingers at me for something like that, and it ended up being the last time we spoke for a long while. So my grandparents totally came through and helped me get settled into my college dorm. It was a whole vibe. After breaking up with my high school boyfriend because his college was too far, I entered college single and excited to dive into this new chapter of my life, filled with independence and determination. The breakup was tough, but I was really looking forward to connecting with new folks. This is the place I crossed paths with David. We were both freshmen, and we totally spent half our days just hanging out in the library. David was totally one of a kind, unlike anyone I'd ever encountered. His chill vibe and bookish personality were totally relatable, and we hit it off fast over our mutual passion for learning. As time passed, our friendship evolved into something more profound, and I came to understand that my feelings for David had grown beyond just being friends. As someone who thrives on social interaction, I was totally open about my feelings for David, and it caught me off guard to find out he felt the same way. We've been together for 8 awesome years now. My grandparents have met David, and they totally think he's the best. I've met David's parents, and they seriously treat me like I'm their own daughter. Sometimes David's mom has opened up to me about how she always wished for a daughter, so she's really happy that David found someone like me. Honestly, this is the first time I've been around family who actually like me and don't hold any grudges. I've shared my childhood stories with David, and he really gets it. He listens with such empathy and understanding. Over the past 8 years, my parents have barely reached out to me, only sending a birthday text now and then if they happen to remember. But that's about it. So guess what? David and I just got engaged. He popped the question while we were hiking to our special place to catch the sunrise, and it was just like a scene out of a dream. It was really adorable how anxious he was about asking me to marry him, and I felt completely certain when I said yes to the proposal. I shared some pics of my engagement on Instagram and let my grandparents know about it too. They were totally stoked for me and gave us a big shout out for our future together. It seems like the word got around because my parents randomly called me to give their congratulations too. I figured it was just a laid-back chat since we hadn't caught up in ages. They were curious about my life, my job, and my apartment, and then my dad just came out and asked if he could walk me down the aisle. His sudden question caught me off guard, especially since just moments earlier, he had no clue about the company I worked for. I mentioned that I hadn't really considered it yet, and my dad pointed out how awkward it would be if I didn't ask him. He said people would definitely have questions, so it makes more sense for him to walk me down the aisle. I rolled my eyes and told my parents that I wasn't even sure if I would be inviting them to my wedding, since we hadn't been in touch. But this really upset them. My mom began to express her disappointment in my response, highlighting how crucial family and tradition are to her. She went on to explain that they would always be my parents no matter what, and that I should just move on from the past. I felt a pull to heed my parents' advice and take my dad's offer, hoping to repair our relationship. Yet, there was a nagging doubt, a fear of exposing myself to the possibility of more disappointment and pain. So I decided to let my dad walk me down the aisle since I'm about to start a new chapter in my life in a few months, and he looked really happy about it. So while I was planning the wedding, I decided to reconnect with my high school girlfriends. We've always kept in touch, even though life and our careers have taken us in different directions. I shared my desire to reunite the crew and asked them to stand by my side as my bridesmaids. There were so many joyful tears and cheers all around, and without a second thought, they jumped at the chance to join my bridal party, ready to come together and celebrate this big moment in our lives. So we all decided to hit up Vegas for my bachelorette party, while David was off having his own bachelorette bash with his buddies. So my friends and I shared a ton of pics from the party, and honestly, it looks like everyone had an absolute blast. So I got home, and my parents hit me up to express their disappointment about me not inviting Rachel to the celebration. I made it clear that there was absolutely no chance I would include Rachel in my bachelorette party and that I had no desire for her to be part of my life. This totally caught my parents off guard, and they were like, "What do you mean?" So I explained that Rachel's behavior, especially her past lies and betrayals, really hurt me and made me question her motives. I just couldn't wrap my head around the idea of inviting her to my bachelorette party, especially since her being there would only bring negativity. I also let my parents know that this was the reason she wasn't invited to the wedding either. Upon hearing this, my parents completely flipped out. They really went on about how I shouldn't exclude my sister from my wedding, insisting that it was my responsibility as her sister to make sure she was part of such significant moments. So I heard that Rachel was really excited to meet me once she learned I was getting married. I was really puzzled and asked my parents what made her think that, especially since we hadn't spoken in ages. But they just waved off my worries, saying that's not how sisters act towards one another. I get what you're saying. I let them know. Look, my situation with Rachel is pretty complicated, okay? Given all that's gone down, I really don't feel right about having her at my wedding. She hasn't even bothered to say sorry for all the stuff she put me through. As always, my parents just brushed off what I had to say. My mom kept insisting that she wanted what was best for the family and that inviting Rachel wasn't a big deal at all. My dad was adamant that our relatives would start discussing why my sister wasn't invited and that it would reflect poorly on my wedding. Still, I was wise enough to stand my ground and not give in to their demands. I mentioned that I was totally fine with folks chatting behind my back and doubting my character, as long as I had my favorite and trusted people around me on my wedding day. So, my mom asked if my fiance would be cool with this and started going on about how my in-laws would totally judge me for being so incredibly harsh by not inviting my own sister to the wedding. I chuckled and let my parents know that my fiance and in-laws were already aware of my family situation, and honestly, none of them would bat an eye if Rachel showed up or not. They really pushed me to think twice, highlighting how crucial it is to keep the family together and to let go of grudges. I stood my ground, refusing to sacrifice my own well-being just to make others happy. Ultimately, we decided to part ways on our differing views, each of us clinging to our own opinions. My parents mentioned they needed some time to reflect, and that wrapped up our discussion. I told my grandparents about this because I felt a little guilty for standing up to my parents, and they totally support me. My grandparents advised me not to feel obligated to invite anyone I wasn't comfortable with, and as expected, my parents were trying to make me feel guilty about it. After our chat, I've been feeling a little more at ease with my choice and have thrown myself into wedding planning since the big day is coming up quickly. So my dad hit me up last week to drop some news. He said he and my mom had really thought it over and they've decided they're not going to the wedding anymore. Before I could even process what was happening, he just dropped the bomb that this also meant he wouldn't be walking me down the aisle. I asked him if there was a specific reason, and he told me that Rachel was moving to a new place soon, which my parents had helped her find. Since I was excluding her from the wedding, she decided to throw a housewarming party on the same day, so they would be going to that instead of my wedding. I was hit with a wave of shock and disbelief as I tried to wrap my head around what my dad just said. Finding out that my sister's housewarming party was more important than my wedding was a tough blow, deepening the feelings of hurt and betrayal that I've carried for years. I just let him know I got it and then ended the call. Even though I put on a brave face for my dad, inside, the sting of rejection hurt more than I could ever say. When I told David, he was really upset about how thoughtless my parents could be, especially since they were the ones who pushed for the invitation in the first place. It was him who suggested I reach out to my grandfather, considering he and his grandmother played a bigger role in my life than my own parents did. I decided to reach out to my grandparents and see if they'd be up for walking me down the aisle at my wedding. I felt a lump in my throat and my eyes started to water as I talked, totally overwhelmed by the feelings of how significant they were to me. You've been so much more than just grandparents. You've truly been like parents to me. I seriously can't think of anyone else I'd want with me on my wedding day. My grandparents were all in without a second thought. They expressed how much it would mean to them to walk me down the aisle, and unlike my parents, I felt confident they wouldn't let me down. Their words totally calmed me down, and in that instant, I experienced this deep wave of peace and satisfaction just hit me. Having my grandparents around made me realize I had a family that loved me no matter what, embracing every part of me, imperfections included. I had a chat with my in-laws about this, and David's parents made it clear that they really didn't mind if my parents were there or not. They were just thrilled to be there to support our union, no matter what. So my wedding is just 2 days away, and I woke up to a bunch of missed calls from my dad today. I called him back thinking it was some kind of emergency. When he finally picked up, he hit me with a question about whether it was true that my grandparents were walking me down the aisle. I agreed with him, and then my dad started ranting about how disrespectful it was to have asked my grandparents. I pointed out that he was the one who chose not to attend my wedding, so I didn't understand why he was acting so upset about it. My dad started yelling at me, saying that he and mom were just trying to help me realize my mistakes. He believed that by turning down the invitation, it would serve as a lesson for me. He went on to explain that it was him and mom who had raised me and covered my food and education. So my grandparents had no right to take his place. I attempted to explain my perspective, sharing how my grandparents supported me in ways he and mom never did, but he just wouldn't hear it. He pointed out that I had managed to push everyone away and that it was entirely my responsibility. Ever since that chat, I've been questioning whether I actually messed up in some way. Is it a good idea to ask my grandparents to walk me down the aisle? Update 1, whoa, I totally didn't see this many comments coming on my post. I've come across plenty of tips and recommendations on how to tackle this situation. I totally get it. I really need to just cut ties with my parents for good. Their endless drama is draining, and it's really taking a toll on my mental well-being. I really don't want them around anymore, especially since they've made it clear that Rachel is always their top priority. My parents have always been selfish, and I've been aware of that for quite some time. But how is it possible for a child to just stop loving their toxic parents? It's one of those things that's super easy to talk about, but actually putting it into practice, that's a whole different ballgame. But honestly, for my own sanity, I have to go through with this so I can actually enjoy my wedding tomorrow. Update 2. Apologies for the radio silence this past month. I've been really swamped since my wedding. So let me tell you, my wedding was a success. I had my grandparents right there with me as I made my way down the aisle. Even without my parents around, I was filled with an incredible joy as I said my vows to David, promising to share our lives together forever. Dancing the night away with my girlfriends is such a blast. I can't stress enough how crucial it is to keep those childhood friendships alive. They often turn out to be your chosen family, and that bond is irreplaceable. At the reception, I couldn't help but feel a bit of sadness knowing my parents weren't there to experience this special moment with me, especially while I watched David's family giving heartfelt speeches. Still, I found comfort in knowing I had chosen what was best for me, putting my own well-being and happiness first. A few of my friends took the stage to share heartfelt speeches, reminiscing about our shared experiences in the strong connection that has seen us through both the highs and lows. After the wedding, David and I headed off on our honeymoon, a generous gift from his parents. I've been just chilling and having a great time with my husband, taking it easy every day. I can't help but feel this rush of excitement whenever I glance at David and remember that he's my husband now. I previously mentioned that I decided to cut off my parents by blocking them on all platforms. I didn't even feel the need to explain myself because, honestly, they don't deserve it. Honestly, I'm not even sure if Rachel really had a housewarming that day or if it was just a convenient excuse for my parents to skip my wedding. But at this point, it doesn't even matter to me. I genuinely hope for nothing but the best for them and their cherished daughter. Update 3, I wasn't planning to share anything else after my last update, but something totally unexpected happened, and I figured you all should know. So I totally ignored my email for a month because I was wrapped up in wedding and honeymoon stuff. But today, while I was going through the inbox, I stumbled upon an email from Rachel. I seriously have no clue how she got my email address, and I was totally caught off guard. I was torn between just deleting her email without reading it or giving in to my curiosity. In the end, I couldn't resist and decided to click on it. There was a long message from Rachel where she shared her feelings about our rocky relationship and her hope to make things right between us. She owned up to her past mistakes, recognizing that she had acted selfishly and immaturely. Rachel said she was sorry for all the hurt she had put me through over the years and really wanted to make things right. She shared her happiness for me now that I'm married and expressed her best wishes for my future. She wrapped up the email with a heartfelt request, urging me not to distance myself from my parents, emphasizing how much they missed me. As I read her words, I was hit with a whirlwind of feelings, surprise, and a healthy dose of skepticism. I really want to think that Rachel has actually changed, that her apology is genuine and she's ready to put in the effort to fix our relationship. Yet, there's a part of me that feels skeptical because this just feels too good to be real. Honestly, no matter what she says, I'm convinced my parents don't miss me. If they did, they wouldn't have treated me like this all these years. I considered firing off a response to her, but ultimately, I chose not to. At the end of the day, taking your time with forgiveness is totally valid. It's definitely a journey that takes some time and thought. I'm not entirely convinced I'm ready to forgive Rachel just yet, but I also don't want to completely cut ties since she did reach out and apologize for what she did. Honestly, ever since I got married, I just don't feel lonely anymore. I've come to appreciate having my amazing husband with me, my supportive friends, and the constant love from my grandparents. With their backing, I'm confident I can tackle any challenges that come my way without relying on Rachel or my parents at all. I've done some digging and finally found a solid therapist. Just booked my first appointment. I've decided to take this step to confront and work through any past wounds and find healing.